Hi everyone, welcome to America and welcome to the Leeap project. My name is Simon Walker and we are currently in a very chilly Washington DC, and that behind me is the White House. I'm really excited to bring this project where we head to the top 10 startup cities in America over 20 days to explore what the realities of startup life in America actually looks like. We're speaking to some incredible people along this journey and I can't wait to share it with you all. So let's get started now.
The LA scene is pretty nascent, and it's just started to get its legs under it. It's not even close to New York or not even close to the Bay Area. There's only 2 or 3 venture capitalists down here of note, and even those VCs probably do 2/3 of their investing in the Valley. So they're constantly going up to San Francisco to invest and then coming back down here and going, not a really great entrepreneur base yet. However, we did see something really nice over the last couple of years, which was the emergence of accelerators. So Mike Jones launching Science, which is an incubator. Bill Gross has always been here with Idea Lab, but he's up in Pasadena. And you also have Mucker Labs, Launchpad by Mark Suster, and some other incubators, accelerators that are starting to kick in. And the companies coming out of them, I would say, the best ones are comparable to ones coming out of, say, Techstars in Boulder or Techstars in New York or Y Combinator, the best ones in LA. The rest probably need a little bit of work, probably need to lean into it a little bit more, but we're just starting to see that emergence.
So I think that first off is Los Angeles. Typically, I see most of the business in Los Angeles focusing with a business model. There are companies in Los Angeles that are very technology focused that are different. But I just say, the majority are typically business model focused businesses. So that's the right place to go. I talked to a company this morning, for instance, that wants to move to Los Angeles, and they're a very, very socially focused, mobile kind of social network company, and I loved their product and felt like it had a lot of legs. I highly recommended they didn't move to LA. It felt to me like that was a company that needed to get built in Silicon Valley. It also needed the capital that Silicon Valley would provide them, which is deep pockets of capital going up against a concept versus deep pockets going up against a business theory. And so I believe that for them to really flourish, they really need to stay within that ecosystem. There's other companies I see in the Valley that are very brand focused or transactional or commerce related or ad tech, where they really do need a DNA of revenue and business models around them, which I think fit really well within the LA ecosystem.
I've been in startups in a lot of different communities. So New York, Boston, Budapest, Hungary, San Francisco, and I would say that the Silicon Valley is by far the best. There's just such a critical mass of really good startup people there. But what's happening around Santa Monica is just it's a very good startup community, and I think a lot of it is what these guys have been doing here, that they really brought a personality and brought just co-working space in general, brought good companies together, have hosted a lot of events, and just outgoing personalities that have kind of become the glue of the community. So I think it's one of those things you have in common of a lot of sort of smaller communities, is that there's a few people that have really stepped up and become just fun people to be around, that just drive a lot of enthusiasm around startups, and then enough people gravitate toward them and you have a pretty good ecosystem.
Hi everyone, so here we are on the Hollywood Strip. Actually got the Man's Chinese Theatre right here. And now we're about to go check out one of LA's hottest co-working spaces, IO LA. Let's go check it out.
For the past like 9 months, the tech community with all these startups have just really popped up, literally out of air. Actually, it's out of a lot of people's hard work. With 5 incubators and accelerators have popped up. A lot of VC funding has moved down to the LA area because LA startups are really good at e-commerce, retail, aligning with media, entertainment, and celebrities. And it's a really good way to like increase like the visibility of your brand when you attach it with like a media property or a celebrity. So there's been a lot of energy, and so Silicon Beach Fest basically creates an event where we have all the accelerators, all the VCs in the area, all the startup CEOs, all the cool companies in like entertainment, movies, retail, fashion, all sorts of industries, just get together and everyone talks about what they do. So yeah.
It's evolved dramatically.
Blown up.
It's blown up, because I think when I first started, there wasn't like these kinds there was no Silicon Beach Fest.
There was no fest.
There was no fest. There was no startup. I think it was only barely Coloft was like kind of starting when I started. And now there's all these co-working spaces.
You know, what's interesting about cultures like Los Angeles, or what you could say is kind of like non-valley cultures, is that, the more startup success a city sees, the more startups are thus created within that city. And I think part of that is because when you see an individual or a group of individuals become successful through the creation of a company, that creates a kind of viral effect where other people see that success and they want to replicate that success. So what's nice is as we have bigger and bigger companies created in Los Angeles, you thus have more and more entrepreneurs. Which is also why when you look at an area like Silicon Valley, you have such large successful companies that success has kind of umbrellaed down to so many different individuals. You have created a lot of dreamers that really want to replicate that experience. So what's changed in Los Angeles in the last few years? We have quite a bit more large companies, which is great. Because we have more large companies, we have more entrepreneurs. Because we have more large companies, we attract venture capital in a little bit more of an easy fashion. We also now attract individuals who really like Los Angeles as a market, as a place to live. And so we're seeing more and more talent move into Los Angeles, which is great. And I think all that kind of combines to a moment where Los Angeles sees really good growth in creating new companies, new jobs, and new ideas.
Say that there's sort of like an indie vibe that has really come up with the rise of Venice. That certainly wasn't around maybe 5 or 10 years ago. That kind of a vibe that really encourages people to strike out on their own and do something new and try it and build something. I think that very much came out of this West Side part of LA, and this community that was traditionally a lot of like artists and surfers who now are actually starting businesses. So I think maybe it remains to be seen if that's sort of like a trend or that's something that's going to be long term. But I think that's been one of the biggest changes I've seen over the last decade.
The obvious kind of inflection point would have been the creation of the 5 or 6 incubator accelerators over the last, let's say, 18 months. Because generally what you've seen is a lot of the folks that have put funds into those programs, they're looking at giving those programs, let's say, a 3-year runway. So they're saying, we're not sure if there's going to be a massive potential upside in high growth companies, startups, but let's set up a few of these incubators. We'll fund them, we'll give them enough funding to run for 3 years and invest in X number of companies. And if this is kind of going to be the best industry in terms of return on investment, in terms of an asset class, then great, we were already there and we were funding the companies, and then we can continue funding. That original vote of confidence from the capital side of the community has had obviously the impact of from all 6 of them, you see basically between 50 and 60 new companies that have raised their seed round and now looking for the next round basically every 6 months. So no matter what, at least we've seen 60 new companies every 6 months for the last year and a half, and we're pretty much guaranteed to see that same pattern going forward for the next year and a half.
So I've said this a number of times. I will not be surprised that 5 years from now people will look back and say, well, of course, Southern California is a great place to do a startup, and it's something that a year ago they didn't say in Southern California. Now they're starting to say that in other places. So I personally, globally, I think entrepreneurship is a major, major trend. This is the engine of our economic growth in the 21st century, whether it's Southern California, London, or Sydney. And so I think that this community will continue to accelerate. What I've seen over the last 2 years is it's not just great activity, but it's actually a foundational layer that's been built. and that we're now growing on top of that, and we're seeing that again in terms of capital moving into this market, in terms of great service providers moving into the market, and infrastructure building. So 5 years out, I would expect that one, it'll move beyond this hub of Santa Monica and Venice. It'll start to expand into other LA communities like Culver City and Beverly Hills and West Hollywood. So the footprint will start to expand.
You know, I think LA itself is changing really fast as a city. You know, the one thing that LA hasn't had is public transportation, but we're quickly building lines to connect all the parts of LA, and that's been a big major headache. So as LA, the city itself, becomes a more pleasant place to live, I can't imagine, I do imagine, the tech space being a forefront to kind of, creating, new trends in how to integrate tech into a non-tech industry.
Well, I think what I'd hope to see is that there's numerous companies that are generating, over $100 million in revenue that are really becoming kind of beacons of big businesses. Some that have, valuations in the billions that support a lot of job growth within the market, that really are kind of creating that echo of entrepreneurial success within Los Angeles. And I think that's the future I'd like to see here, and that's the future that we're really working to create here at Science, which is building just fantastic businesses that generate tons of revenue and really can kind of build up the city. And so I think that's a fairly realistic vision.
So basically, when you get back, you realize that most people think that the tech space is a bunch of incubators and some of the obvious LA companies. Think, for example, Hulu, Shoe Dazzle, things that like Kardashian's involved with, the things that make the news, mainstream news. But in reality, tech isn't a niche thing anymore. Tech is everybody in business, in entertainment, music, whatever, uses tech in their business. They have social media profiles. They're trying to develop in-house custom solutions to problems, either client tracking or whatever it is. And so tech isn't really, it's not the LA tech community anymore. It's everybody in every industry, media, entertainment, music, fashion, whatever, programming. They are the tech community.
That LA is sort of on the up and up as well?
50-50, it's a coin toss. It could happen, it might not happen. It really depends on, we need to have some really successful entrepreneurs here who then stay in the game and then give back. So it's unknown. I give it a 50-50. You need to have, we have MySpace here, right? But that sort of imploded. And so you need to have, and we had Lower My Bills, but that got sold. You had Shopzilla, you had Price Grabber, that got sold. So you have a lot of entrepreneurs who sold their babies and did very well for themselves, but you don't have like a Google, Yahoo, YouTube based here. And so hopefully Mahalo.com becomes that. And, we have 1,000 people working here and we become an anchor, But you don't have a really big anchor here. So you've got a lot of singles and doubles and triples and aspiring folks. It's unknown if it will become a tech hub.
Sure. Well, I think Los Angeles and New York, from a capital exposure perspective, is probably fairly similar. There's small networks of angels, there's small networks of seed funds, and there's small networks of Series A or Series B scaled funds. So there are great options in both of those cities. There's no doubt that there's more, though, in the Valley and in San Francisco, right? So there's a lot of companies I know that get exclusive financing down here. I would say that when I look at the amount of money we've raised, even if you look at the entire last year, 80% came from Silicon Valley, and the remaining 20% came from LA. And I just, that's probably just frankly just because there's probably 80% more capital in Silicon Valley, right? It doesn't indicate, a lack of interest in Los Angeles. It's just purely a selection issue. But there's plenty of investors here in LA. There's plenty of people to talk with, and they're fairly accessible. So I don't think there's a big challenge there.
One of the things that is a strength of LA is we know how to sell. We know how to hustle. We see great media startups, and we're seeing the disruption of Hollywood. We're seeing the disruption of TV, film, and music, and a lot of those startups are also coming out of LA. I know a lot of people who move their businesses here. One of the reasons that they do is they're in that market of media, and they want to get celebrity endorsement. So we've got large talent agencies like CAA in this town that also have venture arms. and they're incubating startups and they're investing in startups, and they've got clients that are becoming co-founders and investors in startups. So another great strength of this market that's starting now to show its strength in our startup community.
Yeah, sure. So celebrities are going to have, just like most people who aren't familiar to investing in a certain asset class, take startups for example. Generally, they're going to have a manager, an investment, kind of associate they'll be working with, so making recommendations for them. And generally, if you have a company that's making any sort of movements in the space, people who, folks that are higher up in the community are going to be making those kinds of recommendations out to the managers of, there's a massive influx of interest from that community. So you don't really have to think about it too much. Obviously, LA is where everybody is. So if you just focus basically on what you're doing with your company, and it starts to, you start hitting some decent traffic numbers, and you're obviously making progress, you'll usually find yourself getting those introductions anyway.
Well, obviously the weather is the first answer. I mean, this is beautiful. Why would you not want to start a business here? Starting a business is hard enough without having to trudge through the snow. So, no, that's certainly a perk. I do think there's also kind of two other things, and that's human capital and real capital. So, there's still a lot of human capital down here that we're starting more and more to keep instead of losing them to Silicon Valley. As there's more of a community here, you start to see more developers and business folks that want to stay here and give it a shot. So, increasingly there's more human capital to draw from. I think also on the capital side, there are starting to be a lot more investment arms down here, particularly coming out of the entertainment industry. So obviously a lot of the big agencies, they're starting to do some serious investments into startups in the tech world. And so there's just a little bit more money available with connections and introductions that come along with that.
LA is a pretty fantastic lifestyle. So also these cities, the reason why New York, Austin, Colorado, and San Francisco and LA are great tech hubs is because they're just great cities, period. These are the best cities in America in terms of art for young people, culture, lifestyle. So there's nothing better than New York for art and, being part of something special. LA, also very special when it comes to the arts. So I really think that the art scene, depending on how good the art is, a pretty good way to tell if young people are going to want to live in that city, pretty good barometer. And LA has a great art scene, great music scene, and so does Austin, and so does Boulder, and so does New York. So it's not a coincidence. You need to have that art contingent, and you need to have that great lifestyle in order for people to want to be there. So
the big draw for LA, and again, you'll hear this repeated a lot, is that it's really just going to come down to lifestyle. If all you really ever want to do is work on your startup and then maybe hit the beach, and you're not a huge fan of rain. I mean, we've gotten 300 days out of the year it's sunny. It looks like this pretty much all the time. I mean, obviously it's a little marine layery today, but I mean it's this usually burns off and it's sunny all day. So it's really going to come down to lifestyle, and then having access to the main industries here. So we've just got, LA is such an eclectic city. You've got so many different skill sets, and it's, I forget what the report, I'm not sure if it was Kauffman Foundation, but basically LA is one of the most creative entrepreneurial cities in the world. So it's, LA is where you come to, kind of realize your dreams. And so such an amazing talent pool and great weather and great place to live. So, I mean, it's hard to beat. I'll be curious to see what the other tech communities say, but that's certainly what, our feelings, and we certainly like it here, so we're not going anywhere.
This is a Tesla, and you're watching the Leeap project. Hi everyone, thanks so much for watching the Leeap project. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Now remember, if you would like any more information or would like to watch the full-length interviews, hop onto our website. And I'll catch you next time when we head down to the beautiful San Diego to check out their startup scene.